welcome. Delighted to have you with us this afternoon. We're going to be showing a recording which was filmed earlier this week between Mark Walmsley, who is the CISO of Freshfields, and Justin Shaw-Gray, who is the Sales Director for UK, Ireland and South Africa at Synack. That'll be going on for roughly 20 minutes, and I've then got Justin and his colleague Andy here for some live Q&A, so please do send your questions in. On the Q&A, we've also got the chat function. I'll be keeping an eye on both of those. If you do have any technical problems at any point, please do try refreshing your browser, but if that doesn't work, please go to the help desk under account. So with that done, if I could ask my colleague to get going on showing the Fireside chat, that would be great.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's session. It should be pretty informative. My name is Justin Shaw-Gray. I'm from Synack, and I'm joined by Mark. If you don't want to do a quick intro, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Morning to you all as well. So Mark Walmsley, I'm the CISO at Freshfields. So we're a Magic Circle law firm, a big European US law firm. And I've been the CISO here for the last 6 years, but was a former lawyer before that. And obviously a customer of Synack.
Yeah, so we won't hold the fact that you were a lawyer against you. And the fact that I'm
not charging you this time.
You should be. I don't think I could afford you, to be honest.
That's probably true.
Yeah, and the fact that you've got a salesman on the call, hopefully I'll do less talking than the lawyer. I don't know which is the worst of the two evils. There's a way of a quick introduction. For those of you who don't know Synack, Synack was founded around 7 years ago. And our founders, Jay and Mark, looked at the industry and looked at pen testing as it has been happening for the last 20, 30, 40 years and felt that it hadn't changed and it needed a bit of a shake-up. Around the same time, bug bounty was around, so a lot of people will be familiar with bug bounty programs and organizations. Jay and Mark basically said, how about we form a company that meets somewhere in between a pen testing organization, a traditional one, and bug bounty. So what Synack does is we crowdsource around 1,600 of the world's best ethical hackers from 65 different countries. So we work with a lot of organizations around the globe, from 25 user organizations to 1 million+ users. And they're using Synack to enhance their security testing. So when we go into organizations like some of the banks we're dealing with in the UK, government organizations in the US, we tend to find exploitable vulnerabilities that traditional pen testing misses. So on that note, I guess, Mark, I'd rather you do a bit of the talking than me. You know, being a CISO of a major global law firm, you and I met, I think about a year and a half ago. And I know that after a couple of minutes of my sales pitch, you kind of said you were in. But what really brought you into Synack then, and what are your views on what Synack does at the moment?
Yeah, sure. Okay, good questions. And I should say you're right. It's been a year and a half. I've only signed 2 contracts in theory in the meeting, and this was one of those because it is a different service offering. So there's a little bit about the legal industry. It's diversifying. Most global law firms are now also starting to develop their own technologies to offer to clients as a value add, as a way of building stronger relationships. When you start to step into that world, you've got to deliver at speed. And that means that the old traditional pen tests don't really work because of the lead time and the lag time to book in a resource, to be able to get the test done, then to retest, and for the developers to go through their cycle. Means that you're adding a level of complexity and time delay, which is unacceptable to some of our clients and certainly some of our sponsors. So part of the reason that we've gone with you as a provider is speed to market. So we talk about different timings, and Justin, you'll probably talk about your spinning up within a few hours scenario, but anything that can be spun up as a test within 24 hours certainly meets our needs. And then the second thing is the length of time of these tests and the quality of the test. And as we find the world is evolving and hackers are getting better, the quality of our tests need to get better as well. So in short, we took you as a provider for us because of the ability to get those tests up and spun up quickly, the depth and quality and the number of hours that you get. And Justin, you'll be better than me at saying what you get for your hours on average for each of the tests that you do. But certainly, I think it's in the 200 or 300 hours as opposed to your traditional pen tests, which may be your anywhere between 70 hours, maybe 140. So considerably more effort goes into it. But the most important thing is the quality of the output that we get from the product. And I'm not trying to sell it. I'm not a salesman for Synack. I'm talking about it as a CISO who wants to protect their organization and allow our technology department to continue to deliver at pace. And that's what we get with this. But the feedback from our developers is the most important. So they don't mind being caught out because some of their coding's not great. What they really value is being told how to fix that coding really, really quickly, because then they're not playing the guessing game. It's not ethical hackers versus developers. We're all in it for the same reason. And the simpler the output from those tests are, the easier it's for the developers to fix them quickly. So it makes that whole process less painful and more collegiate as opposed to us versus them.
Fantastic, Mark. Yeah, and thanks for that. I think a lot of our customers would agree one of the major benefits is being able to spin up a pen test, as you say, within 24 hours notice is what we ask for traditionally, but we have spun up tests within 8 hours. We've had ethical hackers testing applications for some of the banks where traditionally it would take maybe a month or 2 months to spin up a test. And obviously there's lost revenue whilst you're waiting for an application to go live in that environment. And you're right, Mark, we can rack up 500 hours of testing in 2 weeks. We have seen with some of our customers over 1,000 hours of testing. And the kind of thing I always get is when I talk to CISOs, they go, how did you manage? They get our model, but then we find vulnerabilities that they've just never seen before. So they would have been testing the platform for years and years using traditional testing methods. And then we find a vulnerability that has been there for 2-3 years that is exploitable. They've never seen before. Which
that's the challenge though, isn't it? I mean, sorry to interrupt, that's the challenge. I mean, I like pen testing companies, we still use them for certain types of applications, but the tests are well known and they are scripted. Doesn't matter who you use, they are scripted. For your critical assets, you have to start, I talk to the partners as in hackers are burglars, and burglars diversify all the time. And therefore, you've got to have that mindset of understanding what's the next way to get into the safe and actually act like a burglar to understand where the vulnerabilities are. It isn't here's a script, we're going to follow the script. Is there this vulnerability, that vulnerability? Wait a second, I'm going to break it any way that I like, and I'm going to do it in a competitive way. That means I've got to get there first before the other burglars. And that's gamifying it, as you would call it, means that the product is much better, the output is much better.
Yeah, and that's a good lead-in. So, our ethical hackers, I guess, are the good burglars. We've got 1,600 of them, as I mentioned. The biggest sort of issue I have when talking to anyone is the ethical side of the hacking. So we vet our hackers. They go through a stringent vetting process, which is a telephone interview, video interview. We run police background checks on them. We have several organizations that do tests on our ethical hackers before they can get onto our platform, which means that we only accept around 8% of the ethical hackers that apply to us. And I think you're right, Mark. These guys and girls, they love doing what they do. Most of them, when you speak to them, they want to do it to save the world, make the world a better place. A lot of them do it for money. We're not a bug bounty organization, but we do offer monetary rewards to our ethical hackers. And as you say, Mark, we also gamify everything that we do. So hackers either do it for the money or they do it to be the best of the best. So when you offer incentive to these guys and girls who bring their own tool sets to the table, and you're right, they don't work off a script, they tend to find vulnerabilities that have been missed before. The biggest objection I get, Mark, is the CISOs get it, you got it quicker than most, is when they go back to the business and they say, we're going to employ this company to hack us from around the world with ethical hackers. It doesn't sit comfortable with a lot of people. How did you get through that, past that within Freshfields?
Yeah, again, I mean, we've talked about this before at different events. Even before I answer that question, you've got to ask yourself as a CISO and someone who might be on a board of a company, do you really want to know how secure you are? Or do you just want to go through the exercise of just doing a test? And when you've got the answer to that, that tells you your basic risk appetite. And if you come out, which we have done, which is we want to know nuts and bolts of where all of our risks are, then it's fairly simple thereafter. So a decision by our firm, by Freshfields, to say, yes, we want to know everything, Mark. We don't want to cover anything up. We want full transparency. Once you get to that point, then everything else you can work through. Now, the biggest challenge is the challenge that you said, which is there's 1,600 guys and girls that we've never, ever met before, and they're going to hack us as an organization. How do you get comfortable with that? Well, there are a couple of things. Your background checks, obviously. Your processes to vet people. We've been through all of those. We've obviously tied you down strongly on our contractuals as a law firm. But the interesting part is your 1,600 hackers, ethical hackers, they're all monitoring each other the entire time. It's almost like they're self-policing. So if one of them steps out and starts to do something that's slightly rogue, even before your triggers go off to say, well, this is an unusual behavior, they're using the system in a way they shouldn't be using it, and it's obviously all recorded when they're testing, your other 1,599 hackers will say, Justin's doing something a bit odd here, because they'll all be monitoring each other. So you have a little safety net there as well. But we have no concerns. I mean, I don't know, Justin, if you can talk about your other clients that you have, but you have some very significant US corporates and government entities that you're doing this for. We've all gone through the same checks and we've all come out the same way, saying that the risk is more than acceptable.
Yeah, you're right. And a lot of the federal organizations in the US, government organizations, have been customers of ours for years. And they've got very stringent security controls. And then across Europe, Middle East and Africa, we've only been in region for around 4 years now. And we've got customers through, as I mentioned, obviously from the legal sector, financial services, oil and gas, retail, and throughout. So yeah, the customer base is growing. I think what helps a lot of customers too is that all of our ethical hackers go through our security platform. So we've got full packet capture. We can control what the hackers can do and can't do, what the scope is, rules of engagement, and all those kind of good things. And I know, Mark, when we engaged with your team, one of the things they really enjoyed, as do our other customers, is that when we find an exploitable vulnerability, or one of our hackers finds it, firstly, the hacker that finds the vulnerability first and gives us the best write-up in terms of how they found the vulnerability and how they would remediate, that then gets validated by our VulnOps team. They then feed that in the portal, and then that goes to you guys. So you notified, if we do a 2-week engagement, for example, any exploitable vulnerabilities, you get notified of straight away. And I know that your team really enjoyed that sort of interaction of the vulnerabilities coming in, but also having the dialogue with the ethical hackers during the whole process.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But it also means that you dual run all of your activity. So you've got your ethical hackers finding vulnerabilities and your developers in parallel making the changes, as opposed to traditional pen test. And I'm not being down on traditional pen tests as a place for them. But if you're finding that you've got a vulnerability on day 2 of your exercise and your developer at the end of that day is now working on the fix, you're going to get a better resolution than waiting for the end of the test.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned in the beginning, Mark, you've got a lot of big clients around the world. A lot of them we'll be dealing with anyway. Do you think that the Synack model, because if you look at traditional pen testing, a lot of it is, and this is not a down again on traditional pen testing, is You do it for the regulators, you do it for the authorities, you do it because you have to do it. And you'd run a pen test for 2 weeks and you get the results. Do you think the model now with Synack coming in, we're starting to shake up sort of the new way of doing things, and people might start changing the way they do pen testing or view pen testing?
Well, you know my views on this, generally speaking, that I think regulations are going to die out a bit. The ticking the box exercise is no longer going to be good enough if you have a breach to say, well, here's my piece of paper to show that I did a test or I have these controls in place. It's going to go back, in my personal opinion, to the old way of doing things, which is proper risk management. What's the likelihood? What's the impact? Now, whether you believe that or not, and obviously I do believe that, then in order to do that exercise, then you have to have the detail that sits behind it. And you don't get that through a traditional pen test. You just don't. You get it through something that's more comprehensive, which really gives you the detail about where all the vulnerabilities are, how likely are they to be exploitable, what someone's knowledge of hacking need to be in order to get in and exploit those vulnerabilities. So it is changing, in my opinion, and that's obviously why we're doing business with you.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think just in wrapping this up, Mark, you mentioned one of the things that you like about the Synack model is the ability to spin up a test within 24 hours notice. One of the things that a lot of our clients look to us to do over and above that is continuous testing. So your major assets, whatever they might be, you want tested 365 days a year. You don't want a traditional sort of 2-week engagement, because obviously the day or 2 days after that engagement, the code may have changed and there's more vulnerabilities. So you want to run that 365 days a year. What are your kind of thoughts on that? And how would you class maybe your critical assets, your not critical assets? And
Okay. Yeah, good question again, and not one I've probably had from you before. So there are two challenges. The first one is we've all got just much bigger estates than we've ever had before. The bigger the estate, the bigger the playing field, the more likely you are to get an attack. That's just true, right? Volume equals greater attack vector. The second thing is we're all going down the cloud first route. That's not a new concept. It's been around for a long time, but we are all going down that route. And when you go down that route, so this is Office 365, for example, they're well-known target vectors for hackers. And if you are going to give yourself the capability that comes with SaaS type services, which are known, people know how to hack those services, then you do have to have continuous testing, because it is that someone's slight misconfiguration one day, or you implement a new product that you haven't fully tested and suddenly you have an exposure. Anything that's out there that can get to your cloud service can attack you. It's not like the traditional way where it was all on premise behind tons and tons of firewalls and in a zonal model or microsegmented, where you've got just a different level of protection. If you're going down the cloud route, your critical assets, anything holding personal data for GDPR if you're European, or client data, you should consider permanent pen testing. That just gives you the right level of assurance, and depending on who you are and what your data is worth, the cost is often fairly well balanced. And Justin's not paying me to say that, by the way. Just when you cost up permanent pen testing versus ethical hacking, the numbers stack up.
Yeah, fantastic, Mark. Really, really appreciate that. And then on that note, Mark, thanks for your time this morning, as always. Really, really do appreciate it. And if there's any questions after the session, feel free. I'll be manning the virtual booth, as it were. So feel free to ask any questions. But Mark, once again, thanks very much. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, take care. Nice to see you. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Really interesting discussion there. And I have here with me now Justin from Synack, who you've just seen, as well as Andy Conliffe, who's a senior manager solutions architect for Synack. So welcome, Justin. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you.
Great. So we've had a couple of questions come through on the chat, which yeah, following off the back of the kind of the fireside chat, we had one through from Duncan, which was how do you manage the quality of the output from the 1,600 or so testers when they're not traditional employees? So yeah, one of you two kind of care to address that?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Thanks, Emma. So I think that's where we didn't do that in the video. Our model really stacks up. So as everyone knows, with your traditional pen testers, they get paid a fixed salary, they work off a script, and they pretty much do what they've done for years. With our model, we pay our ethical hackers a bounty. So we're not a bug bounty organization, but we do give them financial reward. So we've got a hacker in Russia who works for Amazon, and he makes just shy of $1 million with us every year. So that will absolutely keep them focused, as you can imagine. So a lot of our hackers do it for the money, but most of our hackers do it for recognition. So we've given them a legal platform to hack against one another in an environment which allows them to compete with other hackers. So we've got Hacker of the Week, Hacker of the Month. Every year pre-COVID, we used to fly 10 of the best ethical hackers to somewhere like Bali or Costa Rica and get them to hack against one another in a live environment. So I'd like to think those two ways of harnessing the effectiveness of the crowd works. And also we keep them engaged. We only have 1,500 ethical hackers, unlike some bug bounty platforms that might have 500,000 hackers. We can interact with these guys and girls and keep very close to them. So when we're doing a test, as Mark mentioned, when we're doing continuous testing, what we tend to do is rotate the hackers just to keep them excited. We've got a lot of different customers now, so ranging from a small user up in Scotland with 24 users to 500,000 users in every vertical. So some hackers love going for the gaming companies, some like going for the banks, for example. So yeah, I think that keeps them involved and engaged in the platform and delivering the results that we see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, Andy, not sure if you wanted to, I saw you went off mute.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to add to what Justin said, when they submit the vulnerabilities, we operate what we call vulnerability operations, who triage them before they hit the customer. So obviously with researchers in 80 countries, English isn't their first language in every case, so they will validate that they're correctly written up, that the quality is sufficient. They include screenshots and evidence and enough detail for the customer to be able to understand, what is the exploit, how can they recreate that exploit. So all that is validated by us first, and it's unique, so we don't want the customers getting duplicates of the same exploitable vulnerability. So our vulnuts will triage that. The other thing we do to try and ensure quality is every test, the first 8 hours, we don't accept anything, we just let them come in. And then rather than choosing the first vulnerability for a particular exploitable one, particular weakness, we choose the best one. So we're always trying to look at ways to make sure that we get quality reports, and there's a heavy focus on that, so that we're getting quality write-ups and well presented reports, rather than just the first one in gets paid kind of thing. So there is a lot of things going on behind the scenes to ensure that quality as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As you said, that's really key. So yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. We also had a comment through, not so much of a question as a comment, which was that risk management processes in many companies aren't agile enough. We're seeing this all over the world, including for banks. That was from Edward. So not so much of a question, but I don't know if either of you would like to comment on that.
Yeah, I would. I was going to actually talk to that, and it's a good point. So when I started, or Andy and I started at Synack 3 odd years ago in the UK, and we had no real customers. Now we engaged with all the major banks, consultancy firms, oil and gas, pretty much every vertical apart from government, for reasons that I won't go into on this call, was all about selling the crowd. So I guess if you're Uber, it's all about selling, we've got 1,000 drivers more than Black Cabs have got, whatever the case may be. Now, the advantage when you talk to Mark or you talk to some of our other customers is, what do we actually deliver their business? And the two things, and Mark will testify, and if anyone has got questions for Mark, feel free to send them via our way and I'll send them to Mark, is agility. So as most people know, in the traditional way of doing testing, it could take 6 to 8 weeks to spin up a pen test. With the Synack model, it takes 24 hours. So if you've got and this is a real example, an app owner in a bank, they go to the security team on a Friday afternoon and say, we've got this new app going live on Monday, we need it tested. The security team says, no, you've got to wait 6 weeks, we've got to schedule it. With the Synack model, by that evening, we spun up 80 ethical hackers. We found a lot of vulnerabilities. The app didn't go live on the Monday, but it went live the following Friday. That app generates $150,000 worth of revenue per week. So we made or saved the bank $650,000 worth of revenue. We've also, so real business value. We're also bringing in something called self-service, which allows customers to do a self-service pen test. So yeah, I think to Ed's point, the agility is on demand, so you can turn up the test in 24 hours. And also maybe agility is the continuous. So knowing that your major assets are tested 365 days a year. So freshfields.com or whoever it is.com, or your major assets is an always on service. And I guess that's as agile as you can get in today's environment. So yeah, I completely agree. Those are the two main business values that our CISOs, customer CEOs see.
Great, perfect, thank you. And yeah, Andy, did you want to have any comments on that at all?
No, not really. I think it does take a little while but finance is our biggest sector, and we're strong in the banks, but it did take a while with them to kind of buy into the concept. But now we've, one of our bigger customers, we even do QA testing with their other pen testers. So they'll give a selection of tests to us each month that have been tested by someone else, and we validate them to make sure the other testing companies aren't missing things, so they can basically rank their other testers. So yeah, I think most customers, once they engage and they see the value, the conversation becomes easier, because it's less about price, it's more about value.
Yeah, no, completely agree with that. Justin, Andy, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are at time, so I'm going to have to wrap up. Thank you very much for a great session. We do have our speaker drop-in session, speaker meet and greet, which is taking place pretty much now in a couple of minutes. So if you go back to the session list, you'll be able to just have a chat with or pose any further questions to Justin, to Andy, to Branko, to Romanos, to Mira, or any of our speakers for today. So please do head on over. If you're not able to make it, I'm sure Andy and Justin will be more than happy to connect on LinkedIn for any kind of follow-up questions. Again, if you're not able to make it to our speaker meet and greet, we will be kicking off tomorrow at 1:10 BST, 2:10 CEST with a fireside chat on the top 5 security projects to drive business value and reduce risk in 2021. So we'll look forward to seeing you there. But thank you very much, Justin. Thank you, Andy, and hopefully see you soon.
Thanks, guys. Take care.